Welcome to the Daily Faceoff Show, your everyday source for the latest news with top-notch insight and analysis. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
We've made it. It's asset protection season. 6 days away from the NHL trade deadline. This is the Daily Faceoff Show, and it's the Tuesday, March 15th edition. As I said, 6 days away from the March 21st NHL trade deadline. He is Mike McKenna, former NHL netminder. I'm Frank Seravalli, and we're streaming live on dailyfaceoff.com as well as Twitter and YouTube. Mike, how you holding up?
Yo, man, I'm living. It's wild as soon as teams start sitting out players. You know, we've really hit the stretch when that's happening. Canadians have talked about sitting out Sherratt tonight. Seems likely. So maybe we'll see some more of that coming, Frank. We got plenty to hit on here with trade deadline moving, don't we?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that anything is quite imminent with Ben Sherratt. And I think there's always this, not suggesting at all that he won't get traded. Someone will step up and take him, of course. But there's always this little game of chicken when you decide to sit him out. Does the GM's phone start ringing a little bit more saying, where's he heading? Who knows? We'll see. A lot to unfold, a lot to unpack. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock. And let's start with our first meaningful trade that occurred yesterday. In exactly 1 month since the Calgary Flames acquired Tyler Toffoli from the Montreal Canadiens, it was the Colorado Avalanche stepping up and plucking Josh Manson, the right shot defenseman, from the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for prospect and second-round pick Drew Helleson, as well as a 2023 second-round pick. And the Anaheim Ducks retained 50% of Manson's salary. Mike, what do you make of the deal?
Well, I like that the Avalanche are able to pick up Manson and not take on a lot of cap hit. About $2 million they can toss into the mix. And this fills a void that I think the Avalanche really needed to round out on their back end. Essentially, for me, this is probably moving Curtis McDermott out of the lineup, who is tough as nails, like hard to play against, but doesn't have quite the same offensive instincts as Josh Manson. So I think it's an upgrade in that regard. And there's been a little bit of uncertainty with the Avalanche blue line. Sam Girard may be out a month. And then you've also got Bowen Byram, who is uncertain whether he may even return this year. So for me, you can never have enough defensemen heading into the playoffs. And obviously a team like Colorado, man, they're just adding good players on top of good players here. And I think Pat Verbeek did a pretty good job in getting what he could out of this deal. Key to it, obviously, was probably retaining salary to be able to get that extra piece, to get the prospect, to get Helleson, who's still viewed by our own Chris Peters as potentially being a number 4 or 5 defenseman in the NHL in pretty short order.
Yeah, and I think it's nice for Anaheim to grab that prospect. Even better for Colorado to pencil in just someone with a different element in their lineup in Manson. It's one of those things I loathe to give Jason Greger, my podcast co-host, credit on the DFO rundown, but he's been saying for months, the Avs need some size, they need some toughness, they need an edge. You think back to Nathan McKinnon's comments last year after they lost to Vegas. He said, we were on our heels a lot. Josh Manson, the way he plays, helps you stay on your toes, certainly in your own end. At least the opposing team should be with Manson out there. And you touched on the real key of this deal for Colorado. It was the retained salary by Anaheim. Yes, Colorado had to pay a little bit more, but it gives them some ammo to go out and get the forward that we all expect they will step up and do over the next 6 days, whether that's Claude Giroux, someone of lesser quality or impact in their lineup, we'll see. But the Avs are most definitely in the hunt for a forward to add to their group. But let's talk about this trade also from the Ducks' perspective, because they've got 2 other key pending unrestricted free agents with decisions left to be made on them. That's Hampus Lindholm and Rickard Rakell. I can tell you that the 2 sides remain quite a bit off on a deal for Hampus Lindholm. They're not really willing to even potentially go to a 5th year. It's been a 4-year offer that's been on the table. They might get to 5. They might be willing to increase the AAV. But for Hampus Lindholm, who was hoping for a 7 or an 8-year deal and perhaps could get 7 on the open market this summer, that's a big difference, Mike, in terms of total dollars that end up going in Hampus Lindholm's pocket. And Rakell, there hasn't really been a whole ton of conversation there in terms of trying to extend him. Feels like that's certainly heading in the direction that things went for Josh Manson, where there was next to no conversation on an extension and the Ducks were just ready and willing to move on. My question to you is this: if you're a player in the Ducks locker room, You've been grinding it out, trying to remain in the playoff race. You've exceeded expectations. You've dealt with injuries. It's been a wacky season. Your GM was fired at some point for inappropriate conduct. How do you feel at this point with pieces being plucked off your roster? Yes, there's a bright future, but the Ducks are going to have to take a few steps backwards in order to get to where they're going.
Well, the Ducks players have kind of taken a couple of body blows here lately. The team hasn't been very good. They haven't gotten saves in net. They have been really loose defensively, and they're just not where they need to be. So I don't think this is a big surprise within that locker room. I'm sure there's some disappointment to see Josh Manson moved out, who by all means was a big part of the leadership group of that team. But it's a sign of things that are coming. Pat Verbeek's going to remake this team in his mold. I have no doubt about that. I don't see any path forward for Raquel. I mean, he's been a good performer, but he's also missed time with injury. He's going to be 29 years old. I think the writing's been on the wall that he was going to be out the door, in my eyes at least. Lindholm is the interesting one, though, because if you talk to any Ducks player, they're going to want to keep that player in your locker room. Like, this is a guy who can perform. He's a top pairing defenseman in the league, but he's 28. He would get a first rounder for sure. How much can that impact the team in the near future? That's the part that's going to be tough to take here, Frank, is that I think the feeling in that room is, hey, man, we're right on the cusp. We should be there next year. That might be hard right now with some of the assets that they're going to be stockpiling. So if anything, it might delay things a little. I'm interested to see how it plays because I think, Verbeek's doing his best to reload here on the fly. But what pieces are going to remain? Not many.
Well, it's going to be tough to reload on the fly, even if you want to, taking off two top four defensemen from your lineup in Manson and potentially Lindholm. Like, those guys don't grow on trees. Maybe you can package some of the assets you get and go after one of those players. There was some talk in the last couple of weeks about the Ducks being one of those teams that could potentially be interested in Jakob Chychrun, who, by the way, is out with an injury for the next few weeks. How does that impact his trade status? I mean, look, there's a lot to unpack here for the Ducks, and none of it is really good news in the short term because there's a lot of work to do to replace those types of impact players in their lineup. Mike, so the other part of the equation here with regards to this transaction that went down on Monday, Josh Manson, everyone wants to know, how does that impact the defensive market in terms of rentals? And I can tell you that just looking at it, I don't know that it actually makes any impact at all. Were teams going to sit there and say, hey, that's great value for Josh Manson. We can potentially get a little more. Or were some teams out there disappointed saying, oh man, maybe we might not be able to get as much as we were expecting? I think it's a neutral answer. I think the truth is Josh Manson was probably always trending towards a second round pick. If you look at his play over the last few years, it's really fallen off since his concussions, since his shoulder injuries. He just hasn't quite been the same player. And certainly hasn't played at the same level that he was at a few years ago. We were talking teams salivating previously. First round pick for Josh Manson all day long. The thing is, now they end up with essentially 2 seconds because Hellison was a second round pick. And as Chris Peters mentioned in our reporting and analysis on dailyfaceoff.com, that he's, trending towards being a full-time NHL player when it comes to maybe an additional season from now for Drew Hellison. But Mike, when you look at the rest of the defensive market, aside from Lindholm, who really gets you excited in terms of potentially adding these players to your team?
Well, I think it's a foregone conclusion that Sherratt's going to draw a first-round pick. I think at this point, Giordano is probably in that range as well. I think that, teams are eventually going to get towards a trade deadline, and they're going to get desperate because somebody's going to lose out on Sherratt, but potentially multiple teams. And who do you replace that with? Lindholm, to me, he's the star of the show right now. I mean, you get offensive production and you get somebody who can play a lot of minutes. But this is about fit a lot of times. Josh Manson was the right fit for the Colorado Avalanche. He can play a 5 or 6 role with them and not log as many minutes as he's had to with Anaheim, play more shutdown. I think it fits him very well, and that's why, for the Avalanche, it made sense to make that play. But he wasn't a first-round pick for a trade. Like you say, Frank, I never had him in that upper tier that, say, John Klingberg was in. Well, he's off the board now. So you're starting to see a really condensed seller's market when it comes to quality defensemen. And that's where I think Sherratt, hey, first. Giordano, probably going to get to that stage as well. But I don't think we're going to see as many first-round picks moved as maybe was anticipated leading into deadline even 3, 4, or 5 weeks ago.
The interesting average over the last 5 years is 5 first-round picks have been moved in the typical deadline period. I don't know that Mark Giordano from the Seattle Kraken is going to get a first. The Kraken are looking for one. I think he's probably trending closer towards the second round pick. Lindholm all day long. I wonder if the Montreal Canadiens with Ben Sherratt have maybe overcooked this a little in that they're hoping for the David Savard return, a first and a third. I don't necessarily think they're going to get that. That's what they've been asking for. And if someone was willing to deliver it, they would have already stepped up and paid it. I don't know. I think you're right. And I think the other part you mentioned, right fit. How about Manson right shot? There aren't many right shot defensemen available. And a lot of those guys on the list that we just looked at, lefties. So, you're looking at Colin Miller from the Buffalo Sabres as another one of those righties further down the list. There's not a ton of right shot defensemen that are available. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on, as well as teams are looking for that right fit. So, Mike, one of my favorite stories that you wrote this season on dailyfaceoff.com was right in the beginning, the NHL tandems rankings. You went through and ranked every team 1 to 32 in terms of the strength of their goaltending tandem, not just their starter, but what kind of play do they get from their backup as well when he's in net, or if the two guys share the net on a regular basis. And you've gone ahead and you've updated your tandem rankings. And I think at the absolute perfect time. You've seen so much talk in the last few days about the goalie market, what happens with some teams that have really struggled in net. The Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vegas Golden Knights are dealing with injuries. We could see a goaltender in Marc-Andre Fleury traded for a first-round pick. What are the updates with regards to your tandems? It seems like we have a new number one.
We do. And this is really fun to do. It's the second update we've done so far this season on the tandem rankings, and up from the number 6 spot to number 1, the Carolina Hurricanes. Freddie Anderson's been really consistent all year long, but really for me, it's been the play of Antti Raanta that's caught my eye. He's 4-2-1 with a .921 save percentage since the NHL All-Star break. And Anderson just keeps rolling. I mean, he's won 30 of 39 starts, and it passes the eye test. Along with the advanced metrics, Frank, he's 29.1 goals saved above expected. So I think that Carolina has been set in goal. It was a bold move to go away from Nedeljkovic to bring those two in. They've performed. Calgary drops down a spot simply because of the play of Antti Raanta. Vladar was very, very good the other night against the Colorado Avalanche. Markstrom's leading the NHL with 9 shutouts, and he's taken on a really big leadership role in the Calgary locker room. I think that's important. And then in New York, this is all on Shesterkin because Georgiev can't buy a win right now. He hasn't won since January 8th. Shesterkin's been the best goalie in the NHL. He's been lights out, .938 save percentage. It's Hasek-like. And I think it's also something that is going to be sustainable. Maybe not at a .938, but Shesterkin is probably in the catbird seat for the Vezina Trophy. So those are my top 3. And then at the other end, Toronto has plummeted. They are way down the list. Campbell had been carrying that club, and they're at a precipice right now where I don't know where they go moving forward. Campbell out with a rib injury, and Mrazek simply not performing up to standard.
So if Shesterkin is likely going to win the Vezina and is in the conversation for the Hart, why aren't the Rangers at number 1?
Well, because I think that if Georgiev's in net, they can't win, and you still have to play some back-to-back games. You still have meaningful hockey to play with your number 2 goaltender. And Georgiev just hasn't won. And that concerns me. I think if they lose Shesterkin or Shesterkin goes into a slide, it's going to be tough sledding for the Rangers.
Yeah, Shesterkin goes into a slide. That is a tongue twister for sure. You look at the Rangers, and I think when you see Georgiev in net, it just speaks to the excellence of Shesterkin because they just get shelled with shots. In terms of the activity in front of the net, high danger chances. The Rangers, their defensive numbers are not fantastic. And, you see what Georgiev, the numbers he puts up when he's in net, it's like he's susceptible to all the things that Shesterkin is able to turn aside with ease. A special season for sure for Shesterkin. That brings us to an update on our trade targets board as we're 6 days away from the NHL's trade deadline on March 21st.
Frank, I know that you're happy that these cell phones today have unlimited minutes because otherwise you would be absolutely in one paying for minutes like we used to have to do. Another time to talk about trade targets. Let's look towards the Red Wings, okay? Aside from Philip Zadina, who's been on your trade targets board for a couple of weeks, there really hasn't been a whole lot of buzz about the Detroit Red Wings. What do you think Steve Yzerman's up to coming into the trade deadline?
The Detroit Red Wings, Mike, are open for business. That's what he's let other teams know in the last days and weeks leading up to the trade deadline. And what does that mean? Well, it essentially means that the Red Wings are willing to consider offers on just about anyone not named Moritz Seider or Lucas Raymond. And a new name that's going to be added to our trade targets board this week is Tyler Bertuzzi, a name that was actually out there last summer, but has gone on and has had a fantastic season for the Wings, a career high in goals. His next point will also set a career high, and he's done it actually without playing games in Canada. He's missed 9 games, ineligible to cross the border as one of only 2 active players in the NHL at the moment that remains unvaccinated. And so Bertuzzi's found a way to continue to be really productive. He's got 1 more year left on his deal at $4.75 million. So he's not an pending unrestricted free agent, but someone that at some point will be due a pretty sizable and healthy raise. And on top of that, what teams love about Tyler Bertuzzi is that he brings another element to a team that's so essential for playoff success. He's got an edge. Some team yesterday told me that he's annoying. He's frankly, basically Brad Marchand with less skill is exactly how he was described. And I thought that was such an apt, way to describe him. And more than that, also a compliment. Some people might view that as a backhanded compliment, but not me in terms of Marchand and his value. Certainly a really impressive player to add to the trade targets board. I don't know that it's likely that Tyler Bertuzzi gets moved, but I do know that the Detroit Red Wings are willing to consider just about anything.
Now, I can vouch for that on Bertuzzi. Our Syracuse Crunch lost a Calder Cup final to the Grand Rapids Griffins, where Bertuzzi was the MVP of playoffs in the American Hockey League. He was annoying. He was a rat. And Frankie also scored a few on me in the finals. So he has that experience at the minor league level. We'll see if he can bring it at the NHL. Calgary Flames. Okay, they made the biggest move at trade deadline so far leading up to yesterday. They got Tyler Toffoli a little bit more than a month ago. But do you think general manager Brad Treliving has another deal left in him?
I do. I think the Calgary Flames are lurking as a team in the weeds that could potentially make a big swing again. And how would they do that? Well, they could move Sean Monahan, who's also going to be added to our trade targets board. And I don't think that's the preference of the Calgary Flames. This is a guy that has been out there for a couple years, has really struggled for the last 2 years. And you don't really want to trade a player at his lowest value that it's ever been. This is a guy that previously you could pencil into your lineup. Look at his few seasons before that, 30 goals, 30 assists every year. He was like your reliable 30-30 guy in the NHL. And now he's essentially become a luxury for the Calgary Flames that they frankly can't afford. Any trade that they'd probably have to make if they're going to swing big would be dollars in, dollars out. And at $6.4 million almost, with 1 more season left on his deal, if they'd also like to keep Johnny Gaudreau for next season, they're going to need to find money somewhere. Monahan's playing in a 4th line role. He's been beaten out by Dylan Dubé for the 3rd line spot. And in addition to that, you look at the job that Elias Lindholm, for instance, has done this year. There's been so many really good seasons from the Calgary Flames. Monahan has fallen out of favor. And I think that there's some teams that are out there that are intrigued saying, look, this guy's only 27. Obviously, he's had a few tough seasons. If we could buy low on Sean Monahan and find a way to rehab him for next season and get him back to the level that he was once at, that it might be worth taking a flyer on him. Again, don't know how likely it is, but if the Calgary Flames are going to swing big, it's certainly possible that Sean Monahan is included in the discussion.
Well, put him on the board. It feels like the trade targets board continues to grow every day, Frank. We've got 14 new ones going on this week, but maybe there's a few coming off. So who have you decided in your mind you think this guy's not going to get traded? No chance. We're getting him off the board. Who are some of those names?
Three guys from the Dallas Stars, Mike. Joe Pavelski, who re-signed, of course, last week, had been plummeting down the board, as well as John Klingberg and Braden Holtby. The Stars formally announcing today that Anton Khudobin underwent surgery and will be out 6 months. You can't trade Braden Holtby now. Jake Ottinger has been the man. He's carried this team as they've gotten back into the playoff mix, but you need some support. You need a second goalie, and Braden Holtby is that guy. John Klingberg, for his part, well, you see Miro Heiskanen. He's out with mononucleosis. They're going to need to rely on Klingberg even more, and they were already really not interested in trading John Klingberg, as they're certainly right in the thick of the playoff hunt. We know that Klingberg had their trade request out there really since December. He's disappointed that he won't be able to work out a long-term deal, and the Stars are nowhere close on a contract for him. But with the way that they're trending this season in a pretty secure playoff spot, trying to hang on to that, none of those guys are going anywhere.
Great job as always, Frank. Things are always in motion, as we know, towards trade deadline. This has been Trade Targets, and hey, delivered by our friends at DoorDash. If you go and grab the app and you use the promo code DFODD within Canada or in the United States, DFODDUS, that will get you 25% off your first order, along with free shipping. DoorDash saves me every single week, Frank. Great job as always on this week's Trade Targets.
All right, Mike, it's time for our daily face-off inbox question of the day. Hit us up on Twitter, #AskDFO. We'd be happy to take your questions. Mike, you see Jakob Chychrun out for the next few weeks. What does this do to his trade chances? For me, he was a guy that had already been sliding down the board a little bit. There had been some teams that had expressed interest a long time ago. We know the Coyotes were looking for a big package. If you were a team looking to trade for Jakob Chychrun, now knowing that he's out for the next 2 to 4 weeks, would you still do it?
Yeah, I would if it was at the right price, but I don't think that there's a huge need on the part of Bill Armstrong in Arizona to get rid of Chychrun immediately. He wants to get the best deal on him. He's already reportedly at least one deal on the table from another team. So I don't think it changes much for Chychrun. You know the player that you're getting, and he's a long play. 3 more years at $4.6 million on his cap hit. That 2 to 4 weeks that he's out isn't going to be a big thing. It seems to be a minor injury. But what I like about Chychrun, Frank, is he's really heating up lately. He's at 15 points, 5 goals in his last 7 games. Ironically, it seemed like he wasn't a good pairing with Lyubushkin, who got moved to the Maple Leafs. So Chychrun's playing well. He has played well. And if a team does make a move, they're still going to get him in time for the Stanley Cup playoffs, Frank. So I think this could go either way, but I don't think it really changes his value much. Do you think so?
No, I was going to say, if you're really making a move for Jakob Chychrun and you're giving up the package that Arizona is looking for, well, you're doing it for the 3 years that are additionally remaining on his contract. And whatever happens this year, obviously with your playoff run, is just a bonus. So that's certainly the way I'd look at it. It has to be the long-term view if you're giving up those types of assets. But at the same time, I've always held the belief that it doesn't really make a lot of sense for the Coyotes to make this type of transaction, but it's been out there. His name's been out there so long. How do you feel if you're him? He didn't necessarily want to leave. It's not like he was raising his hand saying, "Get me out of here." Now his name's been out there since December, and then he has to stay after the trade deadline. I think it just creates some awkwardness. There's a lot to unpack there with what's going on with Jakob Chychrun and the Coyotes. Let's get to Tyler Yaremchuk and our daily face-off daily bet segment. Tyler, how'd you do yesterday?
Well, there was only one game, an absolute barn burner between the Coyotes and the Senators. But as it is when you bet on the sport, I was heavily invested in that one, and the over came through for us. It was a high-scoring affair, so we started the week off with a win, and we'll look to keep it rolling here on a Tuesday. It's a busy night in the NHL, so let's jump into it, courtesy of our friends at PointsBet. And my first play, we are going at the bottom here. This is my big one. I love the New York Rangers on the puck line here. A plus money payout at plus 120. The Rangers are 4-2 this month. They've covered the puck line in each of those 4 wins, and they actually looked pretty good on Saturday against the Dallas Stars. They were down 2-0 early. They managed to storm a pretty big comeback. They win that game 7-4. They're going up against a Ducks team that just sold off Josh Manson, so they're going to be down a piece there. They're also 0-4 on their current road trip. So this is a good team going up against a mediocre team that's starting to sell off, and the Rangers have been covering a lot of puck lines recently. Also, just quickly, adding this one in, I like the Dallas Stars at plus 115 tonight against the Toronto Maple Leafs. No Austin Matthews for the Leafs. They're also expected to be going with Erik Källgren between the pipes for his first career start. Yes, Dallas coming off back-to-back losses, but they're still 6-3-1 in their last 10. I like the Stars as underdogs as well. And then my player prop tonight, I am going out to Montreal and looking at Cole Caulfield. You can see over half an assist is paying out plus 115. This is a plus money payout on something he's done in 8 of his last 10 games. He has 9 apples in total in those games, and the matchup is great tonight for the Habs as well. I mean, they're going up against a Coyotes team that's given up 17 goals in their last 5 games, and they're coming off a game last night as well. So that back-to-back on the road, I think the Habs will be able to get the offense going. Caulfield has been getting a ton of apples lately, so I love this payout. Frank, they usually call him Goal Caulfield. Tonight, I'm hoping they call him Assist Caulfield.
I was more intrigued about what you called the Leafs starting goalie tonight. Did you call him Källgren? Is that the proper
Isn't that
pronunciation?
how you pronounce it? I think it is.
That's what I've heard. It's like Shillington.
Oh, okay. I've only ever heard of him.
It's like Shillington,
so
yeah.
maybe yeah.
We need to go to Sweden together, guys. All of us.
Yeah.
I've never
Someone
been.
help us out.
This feels like a daily face-off finance trip. I'm in. Let's do it. We need to do some research on. And by the way, like, how fascinating would it be if, you know, this is the guy that we end up talking about? We're going to need to learn his name. What if he takes the crease from Peter Mrazek and runs with it? Finally, someone could step up for the Toronto Maple Leafs, making his NHL first start tonight against the Dallas Stars at Scotiabank Arena. Mike, that brings us to garbage time. And there's been a lot of milestones this season. There's a 1,000th game tonight, a 1,000th game on Thursday night for Claude Giroux with the Philadelphia Flyers, but some interesting family ties for some 1,000th games that occurred tonight and over the weekend.
Yeah, and the ex-player in me just loves to see this because it's a huge deal. Playing 1,000 games in the NHL, it's an amazing accomplishment. It's a lot of hockey. It's a lot of hard miles on your body. And take a look here at the Foligno family. Mike Foligno, Nick Foligno, father-son duo, only the second in NHL history to both play 1,000 games, Bobby and Brett Hull being the other one. And I also wonder, could Marcus Foligno join them? Nick's brother, he's played 658 games. He's 30 years old. Probably take 4 or 5 more seasons for him to hit the mark, but he does have 2 years left on his contract. So really cool for the Foligno family. And you've also had the Stahl family with all 3 siblings, all 3 sons that have played 1,000 games in the NHL, hit that mark this season. And I can't help but wonder, Frank, who's next? You got big Walt Tkachuk's well over 1,000 games. I'm looking at Matthew and Brady Tkachuk as maybe being there a few years down the road, still young in their NHL careers, but I think they should be there as well eventually.
What a flex for Mr. Stahl. Like, he's just like, yeah, I produced 3 sons that played 1,000 games each in the NHL. What have you done as a father?
Yeah,
I don't know. Just like, it's such an amazing, awesome, like, I doubt they'd ever say that. They're the most humble people, but like, what an awesome little thing to tuck away in your cap. Certainly,
dude, you sit around the campfire and you just go, man, look at my kids. I got the best stories. Who wants to come in and talk?
Just some amazing genes. Really interesting. And congratulations to the Stahl family as well as the Foligno family and Claude Giroux. I'm sure we'll talk more about his 1,000th game with the Flyers on St. Patrick's Day on Thursday when they host the Nashville Predators. The NHL trade deadline 6 days away. We've got you covered on March 21st, 12 noon to 3:30 Eastern, a 3.5-hour special. Tyler will be there. Mike McKenna will be there. The whole crew, Scott Burnside, Pete Blackburn. We're going to have everyone on deck, all hands on deck for 3.5 hours of commercial-free coverage and breaking news. So stay with us next Monday, March 21st. We've got you covered. That'll do it for today's show. We'll be back right here, 12 noon Eastern on Wednesday. We'll talk to you then. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for watching the Daily Faceoff Show.
Make sure you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel to never miss an episode.